myself, what a wonderful world.
Hello, it's Sunday, January 31st, and I had promised and hoped to offer a full moon video. The full moon was actually on Thursday, I think it was the 28th of January. But as it so happened, life was so full for me that I didn't get a chance to do it. But I do want to offer something now because I think it's really interesting that in fact life was so full and it was the full moon, and I'm really trying to pay attention this year to my own flow of energy and rhythm as it relates to the moon. And it was very interesting that it did. I didn't do enough pre-planning to get the video done by Thursday. I was planning on doing it on Thursday, and like I said, life was really full. I was with my family, my parents in California for the last 3 weeks, and I just got back on Friday. So Thursday I just had a lot to do, and I really needed to focus in on getting that stuff done, which is actually what we're supposed to do with life, is deal with life as it's coming towards us with as much presence and vitality and impact as we can. And so sometimes that means that we have to do things a little later than we expected. But to do it with a lot of grace and a lot of presence is actually the work of living in rhythm with the moon. I'm going to share a link to a website that really beautifully and scientifically describes the way that the moon affects the tides. So, it's like full moon, new moon, is it just happening up there, or how is it affecting us? So the moon affects the tides of the ocean. And if you can imagine the amount of water on the earth, it's a lot. So to actually have such a force, it's a gravitational force of the moon on the earth to actually affect the water, the way that the tides flow, so either high tide or low tide, is significant. It's a significant gravitational pull. And since we as human beings are mostly water as well, it's having an effect on us whether we realize it or not. And I was describing some ways of understanding that with the new moon, and with the full new moon and like the fullness of the moon, what that affects on us. We've heard that things get crazy around the full moon. Things feel highly energized around the full moon. I was thinking about it, and one of the ways, if you live in a part of the country that is affected by wind, so I grew up in Orange County, California, and I now live in Chicago. And in California, we experience the Santa Anas, and those are a very dry wind, which means it's not coming off the ocean; it's coming from the mountains, and that causes a lot of potential for fire. They can measure, they can predict like where the winds are coming from, and so it's not like it's not just random. And similarly in Chicago, certain weather patterns and patterns of the clouds and things, they can tell you like how strong that we're going to be expecting a really strong windy day. And so anyways, the feeling of being out on a windy day is kind of the energy of a full moon. Like, you may not exactly be like, oh, it's a full moon and life is going to be crazy, but for some reason things get a little riled up. You might feel your emotions a little bit more intensely. You might have not even realized that you have an interaction with someone and the energy is interestingly different, for better or for worse. So it's really tuning into that and being aware. Being aware is the main thing, is noticing what is our energy, what is the feelings that we're experiencing, and knowing that they might be a little bit more intense around the full moon. So that's one thing to just notice, that it's not just in our imagination, but to really be aware that the energies around the moon cycle are things that we can tap into to use to our benefit. So I was saying that the new moon was like a clearing, like a blank slate, like a blank canvas. And that's a time that you want to think about new ideas, think about starting new projects, really plan to launch events or products depending on what your work is, or even just to start new habits is really in line with the new moon. The full moon is really like this time when so farmers actually harvest on the full moon, because it's when the fruits are the trees are most easily willing to like let go, because there's a pull away, and for us, we might want to use that energy to wrap things up, projects, and maybe clean, maybe organize, and really wrap things up and sort of bring things to some closure, depending on the cycle of what you're doing. So notice what needs to be wrapped up around this time. And like I said, the full moon was on Thursday, but the next 2 weeks we experience the full moon energy. So sometime in this next 2 weeks, notice like what could be something that has been on your mind that you could really spend some time processing and thinking through. It's like the wind is at your back at this time, and you'll get to where you want to go with a lot more ease and a lot more speed and velocity. So it's not like you're going against the wind, which might be the feeling at the new moon. You're really wrapping things up, coming to some completion with the wind at your back, and that's what it feels like to do this kind of work at the full moon. It might also be a time to think about, instead of the farmers harvesting, like for us to think about like what happened in the last month since the last full moon that we can learn from, that we can give thanks for, that we can analyze and just kind of notice like what did we learn in the last in the last 4 weeks. And it's kind of interesting, but if you just looked at your calendar, we probably experienced and encountered a lot that we can learn from and give thanks for. And I work with a coach, and we were doing this exercise of looking at this past year, 2020, and thinking about writing a list of my disappointments, things that didn't go my way. And actually, it's a hard thing to do because it's not something that feels really good and always, and it takes some courage to actually look at that, what were my disappointments. But she did say that leaders do this. Leaders look at what happened, what didn't go great, what could have gone better. A lot of professional athletes and coaches will look at replays of games and analyze what went well, what didn't go well, what can we do in the future and change and practice so that next time that doesn't happen again. So it really does take some consciousness, and that is the work of looking back in order to move forward. And I'm actually just about to start my weekly review where I look at last week and I plan for this week, and I think about, what didn't go my way, what could I learn from the last week. It is definitely a habit and a way of looking at things with a sense of compassion. So what's obvious about the full moon is that it's bright, and that lightness symbolically allows us to see a lot more, and as I was saying, we feel a lot more, we experience sort of some fullness. Like that's the energy of the full moon, is that there's so much available and awakened in us, in us, if we notice. And that's the thing, you could never pay attention to the moon, and things will just keep going. And it's kind of like you just go out and you didn't look at the weather to know that it's going to rain and not be prepared. So following the moon and being aware of the phases of the moon is kind of like listening to the weather report and saying, oh, okay, I need to prepare for that. I need my wind jacket, or I need my raincoat and umbrella. Just knowing what's going on out there and being prepared for it. So be aware of things like that in the next couple of weeks of, what are you feeling that might be a little bit more intense? Use that as information to move forward. And just notice, like, that's the big part of this, is we could go about life and just kind of let life happen to us. But I really believe that these small and subtle and not so small and not so subtle awarenesses can really help us to live life with a lot more ease and grace. And not that it takes away problems or solves problems, but the more we know, the more we are equipped to live life impactfully and skillfully, and with the kind of awareness that allows us to stay centered and grounded. And so again, it may be super, super subtle, and maybe you just want to look out and see the beauty of a full moon, notice the phases of the moon throughout the month, but just do notice and see if you feel things feeling a little bit more full and expansive and even exciting or emotional around this time. And I'll see you at the next new moon, which is February 11th. And if anyone is interested in new moon circles or rituals, I used to host them, but now I really like attending them, and I have some ideas. So if that's something that you are interested in, reach out to me, email me, text me. Thanks.